Good morning. I'm Dr. Sean Coomer, transplant surgeon and chief medical officer at the University of Kansas Health System. Welcome back to Open Mics and our monthly edition of Show Me the Science. Athletes use creatine to fuel their muscles and boost performance. A pilot study here at the University of Kansas Medical Center suggests creatine may also fuel the brain. It's early evidence, but it suggests there could be an affordable, non-pharmacological method for improving cognition in Alzheimer's patients. Today, we're exploring the study and connecting the dots between Alzheimer's and your brain metabolism. Joining me at the desk today, the researcher who led this study, Dr. Matthew Taylor. He is an associate professor of dietetics and nutrition at the KU School of Health Professions, and we're also joined by the co-director of the KU Alzheimer's Disease Research Center, Dr. Jeff Burns, online.
Hi, Dr. Coomer.
Good to see you, Jeff. And also a sports medicine doctor and orthopedic surgeon, Dr. Scott Mullen, who, by the way, has been using creatine himself. Dr. Mullen, let's start with you. Creatine has become a very popular fitness supplement. Can you explain what creatine is and how it helps the energy supply in our muscles?
So we need ATP to use to generate power and strength in our muscles, and creatine provides a outside source to increase that ATP to help generate muscle power and strength.
Okay. So you've actually personally been using this. Have you noticed any changes in yourself since taking it?
Yeah, I've used it for years. I think that it helps generate more muscle mass, probably consistent with what we see in the literature. But I think it's a very helpful thing.
Mm-hmm. And how much do you take?
I take 5 grams a day of creatine monohydrate, which is the most commonly used form of it, and it's the one that's the most studied.
Okay. So there's the energy inside our muscles, but what about inside our brain? Dr. Burns, what's the connection between Alzheimer's disease and our brain's energy?
Yeah, there is a strong connection between Alzheimer's disease and brain energy and metabolism, and this is something that our scientists here at KU have been studying and actually leading the world in studying, trying to tie together these ideas of there are changes in the metabolism of the brain in people with Alzheimer's disease, and if you zoom all the way in to the mitochondria, which are making the energy supply, there's problems at the mitochondrial level, and so we've been long interested in really leading the way in terms of this sort of idea that brain energy metabolism is something that we should be targeting with potential therapeutics. So strong connections, a lot of work left to do, and KU's really leading the way in this area.
And that's great to hear. Dr. Burns, do you encourage your patients to take creatine at this point?
Not yet. I don't discourage people if they're saying they're taking it, because I think it's safe, and now we have what Dr. Taylor's about to show us here. But so I don't discourage it, but I don't know if there's quite enough evidence. We need more, and we're working on that to get to where we're really making those sort of policy level decisions to encourage it in all our patients.
Yeah, I think we're all asked by our patients about a lot of different medications they want to take that are they're alternative medications where it might be, and we don't always know, but nowadays, just like we're going to talk to Dr. Taylor about, these types of things are going under close scrutiny and research. So, Dr. Taylor, what inspired you to investigate creatine as a potential treatment in patients with Alzheimer's disease?
Yeah, so I was raised under Dr. Burns and Dr. Swerdlow with this brain energy metabolism Alzheimer's focus. And that's what my lab does, is looks at how we can target brain energy metabolism and improve it. And creatine's a really important molecule for transporting energy and storing energy. And it seems that it might actually be changed a little bit in Alzheimer's pathology. So that's one of the targets that we can think of from a bioenergetic standpoint. And prior to us doing this human study, there had been a couple of preclinical mouse studies that suggested that creatine in these Alzheimer's mouse models actually improved brain energy metabolism in both males and females, and also had some cognitive benefit in females. So it was great timing. We saw these preclinical data come out, and we had been doing work in humans, and it kind of fit the focus, and so we thought it was time to look at it in humans with Alzheimer's disease.
Yeah, that's incredibly interesting. We probably we owe you some therapy sessions for being raised by Dr. Burns, Dr. Swerdlow, but that's a whole different discussion for a different time. You named the study CABA, C-A-B-A. What does that stand for?
It was creatine to augment bioenergetics in Alzheimer's disease.
Okay. And this was a single-arm pilot trial. So single-arm means no control group. Everyone got creatine. So how do you know it was working?
So in Alzheimer's, we typically expect that there would be a progressive decline. It was a short study, so how much a patient might decline is highly heterogeneous. However, it does give us some indications that if we can see signal for improvements, then that gives us something to sort of get excited about as preliminary data. So at this point, I can't say that we know that it was working, but we can say that we saw some associations with taking the creatine, and that it gives us a really nice signal that this might be something that we should keep looking at.
Yeah, and pilot trial means that there's more to come. This was just a test and maybe something bigger.
Absolutely. We really just wanted to see if they could do it, and they did a great job with it, and we've got these early signals, so it's exciting.
So Dr. Taylor, you focused on people who already live with Alzheimer's disease. How many participants were in this study, and how did you structure the trial?
Right, so we had 20 participants. They all got as you'd mentioned, they all got the intervention. They did a great job with the intervention. They took 20 grams per day, which was divided into two 10-gram doses, one in the morning and one in the afternoon. And then we were doing a lot of work trying to capture, are they following the protocol? They did it for 8 weeks, and we wanted to see whether or not some of the really important energy metabolism biomarkers that we're interested in might change. So we looked at brain creatine levels using an MRI machine. And then in Alzheimer's, we want to try to improve people's cognition. So we looked at cognitive changes over that time, and then also looked at some blood biomarkers for energy metabolism as well. So that was the basic structure. Could they do it for the 8 weeks, and then to see whether or not we could see some changes over that period of time.
So I assume part of the next step would be a dose response curve. So you said 20 grams. Dr. Mullen was taking 5 grams for muscle. That's a lot more, 4 times as much.
It's a lot. Yeah, it's a lot more. I think that would probably be a really nice progression to figure out, are these larger doses valuable, and really test that, and then determine whether there's any non-inferiority of dropping the dose.
So we have some of your figures. I think we're going to pull up here. Can you explain what we're seeing in this brain total creatine graph?
Yeah, so we measured creatine in the brain using magnetic resonance spectroscopy, which is a very specific type of MRI. And what you're seeing here is that we measured their brain creatine at the beginning of the study, and then we measured it again at the end of the 8-week intervention. And what this graph is showing is that most everybody went up. Both males and females had pretty large increases in their creatine. Overall, the group increased their creatine by 11%. And so we think that, there's been a lot of question about whether creatine gets into the brain, how permissible to the brain it is. And so this is actually showing that we believe that it is, and there's some other evidence that suggests that as well, but has a pretty profound impact on the brain creatine levels.
And we see a couple horizontal lines there. I don't believe that's a patient. That's just control limit. So that's not the patient there. But the rest all seem to have gone up. So for tracking cognitive function, we have 4 different graphs. So what are we seeing here?
So we used a cognitive battery known as the NIH Toolbox. And it is a validated cognitive test. So the battery contains several different individual tests. We had hypothesized that working memory and executive function might change, because those are some of the most affected domains of cognition in Alzheimer's disease. And so each of these individual boxes reflect one of the individual tests and the trajectory of change from each person. And so what we saw in this study was we did see improvements in working memory. We saw a trend for improvement in executive function. P-value was right at 0.05, so it's really close. And then their overall cognitive scores went up as well.
That's incredible. Definitely improvement. I think that was great. Dr. Burns, can you put that into context for us?
Yeah, I mean, I would say that for sure this is really exciting and encouraging, and arguing that we need to take the next step and do bigger trials to be more definitive. What Matt's laid out, or what you've laid out, is the data that shows that we're seeing creatine get into the brain, and we're measuring that, and we're seeing evidence of some cognitive benefit. But you also pointed out this is a single arm. There's no placebo group that we're comparing to. People can have practice effect when they do these tests. And it's a pilot study. It's a small study. But certainly this is what we want to see in sort of the steps towards really proving something like creatine can be helpful in people with Alzheimer's. So a really important first step, and very encouraging. And we're ready to go to take it to the next level.
Yeah, I think the next logical question we'll probably get into later is it going to help somebody without Alzheimer's? We'll talk about that later, I think. So, Dr. Taylor, what are the biggest limitations, and what needs to happen next to confirm these results?
Yeah, so Dr. Burns actually laid out a couple really important limitations. It is a small study. In Alzheimer's is a heterogeneous disease, so we can't predict how a person's going to decline over 8 weeks. So are these before and afters? Are they potentially practice effects? I think that we could probably make an argument that they may not be practice effects, but we still have to test that out. Not having a control arm basically means that we aren't able to compare that to a control to see whether or not those trajectories are different from each other. And so, yeah, the next steps are going to be we need much larger sample sizes. We need to have a control group. There needs to be placebo-controlled and double-blinded, so that we as researchers and those that are participating in the study don't know what they're getting. And just continue with some of the same rigorous measures that we were using in this study as well, maybe even some updates to the cognitive battery to be more reflective of what kind of changes we have seen in historical clinical trials in Alzheimer's disease that align with drug trials and things of that nature.
Well, you might have a couple placebo patients here. Dr. Mullen being one maybe. What are some common side effects of creatine, and are there any safety concerns with long-term use?
So the most common side effects that are reported are some people get a little GI upset or a little nausea with it. If you're not taking the double dose a day and you're taking the 5 grams a day, if you just take it at night, oftentimes that alleviates that. Cramping can be a concern because if you're not staying hydrated and drinking enough water, you can get muscle cramps. Some people will complain of weight gain, but it's probably because of more retained intracellular water within the muscle rather than truly gaining weight from it. Creatine is one of the most studied supplements on the planet. There are over 140 meta-analysis and systematic reviews on it, indicating that it is a very safe substance. Back when I was in high school, there was big concerns that this was taking steroids and this was something that was very unhealthy and bad for your kidneys. And in fact, the studies have shown in otherwise healthy adults, no impairment in renal function, no impairment in hepatic function. There is caution recommended in patients who have any baseline kidney disease, liver disease, hypertension, things like that. But in general, this is an extremely safe supplement to use. And again, one of the most studied supplements on the planet.
Do we know of any interactions with other medications? Like when you think about statins, sometimes people get myalgia, muscle cramping and pain with statins. Anything like that?
I don't think there's a correlation there. I think it's more from dehydration that people get it.
Okay, great. Dr. Burns, what does the realistic timeline look like for moving from this kind of pilot study to a larger clinical trial?
Well, that really comes down to funding. I know Dr. Taylor's ready to go. He submitted a grant months ago, and we're waiting to get a review on that. And, we need NIH funding, National Institute of Health funding, to remain strong. So advocate for NIH funding. If you're interested in science like this, it's really the only place we're going to get funding for studying something like creatine. And so the timeline is we're ready to go and ready to move, but it does take some time, and it's usually in assembling and sort of winning those grants to move this to the next phase.
Yeah, grants are tougher to come by these days, and obviously with the government shutdown last night, that makes it a little bit more difficult. But But Dr. Burns, can you tell us how long does it typically take for something like this go from clinical trial to advice from your doctor to receive this?
Yeah, I mean, we want to be right. We want to prove. It's really hard to prove something. And you can see these are the early steps. You can see how we're going about proving that we're engaging, metabolism, we're engaging the brain, and then we're seeing some pilot evidence of cognitive function to take the next big step. And it's a series of steps to really prove something, and it takes years, and it takes a lot of support, a lot of money to pay for the team that we've assembled to run these studies and all the work that it takes. So it's a process. We need to follow the process, and it takes time, but we're ready to go.
All right. Well, Dr. Burns, thanks for joining us. I understand you have to go see some patients, so we really appreciate you being with us.
All right. Thanks for having me.
We're here to answer your questions. Please send them in using the information on your screen. That includes the chat on YouTube or Facebook, or emailing the Medical News Network. Let's check in with Doc Hawk. The most recent data shows that respiratory illnesses, including flu and RSV, remain very low, and it seems COVID activity is reduced as well. Is that correct?
Yeah, absolutely. We know that from national data, certainly we didn't have as high levels here around the Midwest as they did on the coast. But if you can see here, this is for Kansas. This is from the CDC, updated on September 26. Obviously, COVID-19, influenza, and RSV remain very low. Overall, in the United States, where it was higher, is just as I talked about on the coast, we have seen decreasing activities, both of illness, but also in the wastewater as well. So it seems like possibly for right now, COVID circulation has declined, and also more to the point, and what we care about really is the clinical illness. Hospitalization rates have declined as well, and we know that death rates have decreased overall the past couple weeks from that recent peak, but we know that our seniors continue to remain the highest risk for hospitalization and death. However, we know that there are other people, or we've known a lot of people probably recently in our lives that have been sick and have been tested for COVID and influenza, and it's negative. We know that there continues to remain a fairly high activity of another coronavirus, or another common cough and cold virus, one of the most common, which is rhinovirus. So we know that those levels are high. This is a dashboard or a graph showing that gray line is rhinovirus. Again, that's one of the more common cough and colds that is very easily spread by those fomites. So when you're touching high touch surfaces like door handles, railings, desktops, tabletops, and you're putting your hands in your eyes, your nose, your mouth, that is a very common way that you can get that virus. So we know that is increasing or fairly high circulation, causing disease. But right now, the other common respiratory viruses that we generally talk about, COVID, influenza, and RSV, are currently low. So we know that we still have time to wait for that. We are only entering into respiratory viral season at this point in time.
Yeah, we're bracing for that. I mean, I was looking at some data the other day about hospital admissions with RSV, particularly the pediatric population. And 2 years ago, it was extremely high, like it always has been. But the past 2 years, we basically haven't done anything. And so vaccines are available, and that's what changed RSV. So what can you tell us about that as well as other vaccines?
Yeah, I think that's vitally important. We know that currently RSV and influenza vaccines are available, just as we talked about. There continues to be great data coming out supporting the use of maternal RSV vaccines. So that is when mom, either who is currently pregnant, has gotten vaccinated against RSV. She then can deliver that immunity to her baby in the form of antibodies, which cross the placenta and give those newborns very good protection against RSV for 6 months. We also know that there is a monoclonal antibody you can give to baby, which helps. And then especially for our seniors who are also at highest risk of severe RSV, we know that those vaccines are available now. This is, I think, the third year that it's been available. So far, if you have gotten your RSV vaccine, just 1 dose, that is all that's needed. It is so new, they are continuing to look at the data to support if you need another dose. But right now, if you've gotten 1 RSV RSV vaccine dose, you should be protected. But if you haven't, please go out and get it, especially if you remain in those high-risk groups. And just as you had talked about with RSV, also influenza, we should point out that influenza continues to be very high for causing disease in children. We know that unfortunately last year we had over 280 deaths from influenza in children. So it is vitally important to get those age groups, that demographic of children vaccinated as well. If you remember, the CDC recommendation for influenza vaccine is anybody 6 months or older should be getting influenza vaccine. I think now being October and being still early into the respiratory viral season, now is a great time to get those vaccines to build up that immunity. So when activity does rise, you will have your immunity built up to help reduce. Now remember, again, vaccines aren't really to protect against infection. What they do, and we have great data to support this, is reduce your chance of severe disease and going to the hospital. And that's important for everybody in the family.
Great. Thanks, Dr. Hawkinson. Yeah. Honorary Dr. Alexis Del Cid is watching for questions from our community. Alexis?
Good morning, and we have a great question from Jean Reardon. Jean wants to know, would creatine feed prostate cancer like testosterone?
Who wants to take that one?
You certainly wouldn't expect it to. It has a completely different mechanism and route through which it works. It's not a hormone. It's not a steroid, to be clear. Again, it just helps generate more ATP within the muscles, so it should not be a problem.
Jim has a question. Jim wants to know, what's the typical dosage difference when it comes to athletes taking it versus the dosage used in this study?
Yeah, I think we heard it was 5 grams that Dr. Mullen was taking for exercise and muscles, and 20 grams in this study. Do you want to comment on that, Dr. Taylor?
Yeah, so years ago the approach was to saturate the muscle with 20 grams for about 5 days, and then you would taper down to a 5-gram dose. I think now most people are just starting off on a 5-gram dose when it comes to the ergogenic effect of creatine for sports and other athletics. And our dose was much higher than that, 4 times the size of that. There have been some studies that have looked at how creatine might impact the brain, and those range anywhere from about 10 grams to 40 grams, so much higher doses than what we typically see in muscle. But I think the question is, do we need to give that high of a dose? And hopefully we'll know that as we keep studying this.
Right.
Julie has a question about the study. She writes that you said all the people in the study had Alzheimer's disease. What stages of the disease were they at?
All of our participants were in either mild to moderate Alzheimer's disease. That was an inclusion criteria for the study. We did not have severe Alzheimer's patients, but those that were anywhere from the early stage of first getting an Alzheimer's diagnosis to having a more moderate condition.
And then Marie has a follow-up question to that about the study. Were the people in the study doing other things to improve their cognition?
They were. So with studies that look at adjuvant therapies like creatine, oftentimes these participants are taking cholinesterase inhibitors, drugs that are typically given for Alzheimer's disease. So that was actually an inclusion criteria for our study as well. All of our participants had to be on some sort of an Alzheimer's drug, and they had to have dose stability for that drug as well, just to make sure that we weren't making any big changes to the pharmacology. That way we were more certain that some of the changes that we were seeing in the study would be related to the creatine that we were giving them.
And then Alex wants to know, are there any dangers in taking too much? Can creatine interfere with other medications or other supplements?
Yeah, I think Dr. Mullen might have talked about this a little bit earlier, that don't seem to be a lot of interactions with things like that. Unless you have some pre-existing liver or kidney problems and comorbidities, probably don't want to take it in that case. Anything to add to that?
No, I think that's the big thing. I think obviously if you are on multiple medications, it's probably worth discussing it with your primary care doctor before starting it, just to make sure that they don't have any concerns. But in general, extremely safe supplement.
Marcia wants to know, at this time, would taking 20 grams be inadvisable for anyone interested in taking it to stave off Alzheimer's?
Well, we're not sure whether if it works that way. I think that's going to require a lot more research. So we believe that it could, but there's a lot more research that needs to be done in that space. What I will say, though, is that creatine has been really well studied for safety, and that 5 to 20 gram dose should be very safe for anybody that is taking it, as long as if they don't have any kind of renal issues or anything like that. And just be on the lookout for any kind of GI distress that might come with it, any cramping, and make sure to drink plenty of water if you take creatine.
Doctors, I have a question just for all of you, because I'm always so curious about this. What's your take on do gummies work as well as pills or powders? Does one method work better than the others?
Do you want to take that?
So I think the problem with gummies can be consistency. I don't know what you think about that, but that's what I've read, is that there can be some consistency issues in terms of the dose you're getting per gummy versus if you're taking a capsule or taking a powder. I think the other important thing there is creatine monohydrate is the one that has been studied the most. There are other formulations. Creatine hydrochloride or creatine HCl is a new kind of popular one, because you can take maybe a smaller dose, and so maybe you have fewer side effects from it. But there's very limited evidence out there on creatine HCl versus monohydrate.
Yeah.
The drawback to gummies is you just have to take so many of them to get a high dose. They typically have about 1 or 2 grams of creatine in them, and 2 grams would be a really high dose in the gummies. So if you were trying to hit 5 grams, or if you were trying to hit a higher dose than that, it would take lots and lots of gummies to get there, and powder is just a lot easier way to get there.
Yeah, a lot of these medications don't go through the FDA. They aren't as regulated as how much active ingredient goes in them. They don't vary from one brand to the next. So it does become a little bit more difficult to figure out how much you're actually getting. Yeah. So anyway, this has been a great discussion. We want to get some final thoughts from our guests. Dr. Mullen?
So I think this is a great supplement. I actually suggest it to a lot of my post-operative patients, even older patients that are having hip replacements and things like that, to try to stave off some of the muscle loss. Because, as a 40-year-old who's currently injured, we all know that if you get injured as an adult, you start losing muscle mass fast, and muscle mass is the #1 predictor of longevity. And so whatever we can do to try to build that up and maintain it for as long as possible, I think is important. And I think creatine is a safe way to help augment that.
Yeah, frailty is a big problem. That's for sure.
Right.
Dr. Taylor?
I just want to encourage everybody to be very cautious about how they interpret this study. It is a pilot study. We talked about the limitations. We have a lot more work to do. It's encouraging preliminary evidence, but we're not there yet, and I just want to make sure that we're very cautious about how we think about this moving forward.
Okay. This is just another example of where the University of Kansas health system is on the cutting edge. And, we're looking for grant money. We look under every rock, and not just for the money, but for the answer. We want to take care of patients, and this is just one more example of that. So thanks for everyone for watching and listening. Really appreciate it.
October is Breast Cancer Awareness Month. I'm Alexis Del Cid on the next All Things Heart. She already had a pacemaker, then she needed a double mastectomy. We'll show you the new pacemaker, known as the smallest in the world, and why it works so well post-mastectomy, Thursday at 8 a.m.
Subscribe to our morning medical update and open mics with Dr. Stites podcasts. Now everywhere podcasts are available.